Senior Bowl, Pro Bowl, Super Bowl, the Zion Bowl. We've got them all, and we're going to talk about them here tonight. But let's kick it off first with the Senior Bowl and the road to Draftmania. Eric, let's kick it off with you. The Senior Bowl is over. There's been some mock drafts. Mel Kiper's mock draft is out there now. Who are your top targets for the Browns?
Well, looking at the prospects, I got 5 guys who could potentially go for the Browns at pick number 17. Some would have to slide, but we'll take a look at them. Is first on the only offensive player that I could see the Browns taking with the first-round pick is DK Metcalf, the nephew of Metcalf up the middle, number 21, Eric Metcalf, 6'4", 230 pounds, receiver from Ole Miss. He didn't have as much production as I would have liked in college, never eclipsed the 700-yard mark, but averaged around 6 touchdowns the last 2 seasons. He'd be a solid target that the Browns could pick up. And Devin White, inside linebacker from LSU. He's had 3 sacks and 3 forced fumbles the last season. He's, linebacker's not a position that's a high priority. However, you see what the Bears did last year with Roquan Smith. Now you have to pair him with a Khalil Mack. That would really expedite things. But he would be a tremendous player to have. I don't know if he would be a reach or not. So that being said, I would probably lean towards one of the 3 defensive tackles in the first round. The first one is the wild card, Ed Oliver. He's a talented guy, 2017 Outland winner. He's been tremendous for the University of Houston. He did have the spat with, I was about to say Houston Nutt. That would be a little bit redundant. Major Applewhite over a coat incident, being injured and not wanting to go in for his team. Most times I would say Browns can't have him. Not a good guy, not a team. But at this point, there's so much leadership within this locker room. I think they can overcome that. It's just a matter of, does John Dorsey want him? I don't know. I mean, I'd be fine with him at this point, but will he slide to 17? That's a major question. Along those lines, we have Jeffrey Simmons, who had an off-field incident in 2016 with a physical altercation with a woman. And he's 6'3", 277 rushing. He has rushing ability as a defensive tackle, but that's a hard thing to overlook. And last player I will look at is Christian Wilkins from Clemson, who's 6'4", 300 pounds. He's a mammoth. He could play the 1 technique. He could play the 3 technique. I'm not sure how he would work in with Larry Ogunjobi, but he's a guy who in the middle that the Browns could really use. So, any one of those 5 guys, I would really accept for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, Devin White really stood out to me as I think he's number 3 on Todd McShay's big board right now. Stood out because of what the Patriots have done with the flexibility on their defense and how that has been a strong point for their team, where they've played different types of defenses throughout the season. People have played at different positions. I wonder if Devin White could be one of those players. Drew, who are you looking at as far as
from the guy who brought you Baker Mayfield at number 1 overall last year at this time? The guy that I want is Devin White. You guys have already touched upon him. He's a linebacker from LSU. CBS Sports has him as the number 6 best player in the draft. We saw how bad that linebacker unit got with 1 injury, and you're talking about 3 linebackers, and somebody's going to get hurt at some point, and there is a whole lot of nothing behind Joe Schobert and Jamie Collins and Chris Kirksey. There is nobody behind them that can play, and they need to find someone. There were also some times that Jamie Collins looked like he was sort of going through the motion. Now, I attribute that 100% to Hugh Jackson, but they need to have some sort of depth on this team, and there is nothing behind them. I think it's a big need. I think that is certainly my number 1 choice. Eric, it touched upon the real strength of this class, which is at the defensive tackle position. That's not even counting probably number 1 or number 2 overall pick Quinnen Williams from Alabama. There are two other players, though, that I'm watching. One is Josh Allen. He's probably better as a defensive end, but I think he might be able to play a little bit of outside linebacker. He's from Kentucky. I think he's probably going to be gone, but he's somebody that I could look at to mix in on passing downs as a start, and maybe eventually overtake the defensive end role, maybe spell some of one of our two starters there. And the other guy that I like is not a name that won't bring up positive connotations for any diehard Browns fan, and that is Greg Little. Not the wide receiver that could not catch a cold. I'm talking about the offensive tackle from Ole Miss. I think there is, the offensive tackle certainly played better when we went to Freddie Kitchens, but I think a lot of that was scheme related. There was a lot of max protect. There was a lot of tight ends helping. There was a lot of running backs helping. It was very rare that they left those offensive tackles one-on-one, and that's because I don't think they're all that great. And I think Greg Little is somebody that could play offensive tackle and play it right away for this team.
So speaking of wide receivers that played well for us this year, Jarvis Landry played in the Pro Bowl. He didn't have his best game, but the weather wasn't very good. I think he had 7 targets, 0 receptions. He did have a tackle on the day. Denzel Ward played as well, even though he had concussions at the end of the year. Joel Petonio started. And who am I missing here? We also had Myles Garrett. He had a sack, so that was a pretty good positive. But I think a lot of people showed apathy for the game, even though it still had pretty good ratings for ESPN and ABC. Contract is up for the Pro Bowl in Orlando. What do you guys think happens from here on out with the Pro Bowl?
What do I think happens, or what do I think should happen?
Let me hear both.
What do I think happens? I think they renew this game because there's money to be made, whether it stays in Orlando, whether it goes back to Hawaii. The players like a free vacation. They get $50,000 or whatever it is, or $50,000 extra for winning. But there's a little bit of money, there's a little bit of incentive to playing it. I don't think you see any big changes. What should happen? I'll give you the 6-pack of things that the NFL can do right now that would make people tune into the Pro Bowl. The first is, instead of the coin flip, you get a defensive tackle and offensive guard 200-yard relay race dash, and the winner gets to determine if they get the ball first, which is what you'll want to do when we get into the next one. The second is we implement, for any of you that played co-ed intramural football, the co-ed intramural rules. 1 out of every 3 plays has to go to a girl, right? In this case, 1 out of every 3 plays, the wide receivers and tight ends switch with the offensive line. The cornerbacks and safeties switch with the defensive line. Yes, I'm talking about wide receivers blocking cornerbacks while offensive linemen run routes covered by defensive linemen. Tell me you wouldn't watch it. You're lying. In lieu of extra points, I want the mascot to receive a pre-rolled T-shirt, loaded into a T-shirt cannon, and fire it through the uprights. I want a random punt, pass, and kick competition at halftime, with 3 points going to the team that wins. In the third quarter, I want the offensive and defensive players to switch entirely. Offense is playing defense. Defense is playing offense. Tell me you wouldn't watch Denzel Ward throwing to Myles Garrett. You're lying. And in the fourth quarter, on every second down that a team faces, I want to see a punter or kicker. They must be on the field on offense and defense. And if that player scores, it's worth 9 points for that team's total. Tell me you wouldn't watch. Make it a circus. There's these people are out here messing around anyway. Turn it into a circus. People will watch a circus once a year.
Okay, as long as Andy Reid is competing against children in the punt, pass, and kick.
Not at the Super Bowl. Andy Reid should have.
He's not any bigger than he was 30 years ago.
Yep, and if he wins the punt, pass, and kick competition, the game ends.
Yeah, kids cannot be older than 8 years old. All against Andy Reid. Okay, I like it. Eric.
I mean, they're already kind of doing this now, so yeah, might as well go ahead with that. Odell Beckham, you want you to play safety. Baker Mayfield, want you to play linebacker. I don't care. Yeah, go ahead and have people try whatever they want to do. Put the game back in Hawaii. Orlando, nobody gives a shit. Am I allowed saying shit on this?
No.
Nobody gives a crap about Orlando. It's a fine place to be, but the game's got to be played in Hawaii. It's just so much better to be played there. The players feel a better experience, and there's just a lot more relaxation, a lot more carefree, and people actually want to
that
travel.
Game was so carefree. Get out of here.
As opposed to Orlando.
What if you just take away the pads and just do 7-on-7s? A lot of these guys grow up playing 7-on-7s. Would people still watch a game without pads and maybe have some of these switching of positions? Maybe you have a Joel Bitonio going out for a pass with no pads, so it's a little bit easier to swallow for teams where it's not, you're going to get your legs cut out for you because someone's going to be going after you. You're just going to be running down the fild.
All I want to see is Gerald McCoy trying to cover Joel Bitonio on a sluggo route, and I really think Gerald McCoy would bite on that first fake, and I think Bitonio could get behind him deep, and that's what I want to see. I don't care if they have pads on or not, but like it should be like a rough touch sort of a thing, which it essentially is now.
All right, let's move on to the Cavaliers. They had a game against the Bulls. Both teams had a ton of injuries. I was actually at this game. I sat behind the Bulls, so I got to see pretty much half their team. Wendell Carter Jr. Was injured. He had a huge cast on his hand. He had a thumb surgery, I believe, this season. So many injuries on both teams and really poor records on both teams as well. But it was really fun to go watch the Cavs. I like the effort from Jordan Clarkson, Jetty Osman. Played great games. Cavs get the victory. Put one in the win column, one against the high draft position, but this one was good for morale. But the NBA trade deadline is approaching here. What are you guys' thoughts on the trade deadline? Is there anyone you don't want to see traded amidst all of these rumors that are going on? Eric, let's go to you.
Well, there's three people I could think about. One, I got to think of the youth and legacy in Larry Nance Jr. He's not the best player on the team, but I think he can continue to develop and be a solid role player for this franchise. The next one, I don't know how good he's going to be, but he was our rookie first-round draft pick, so you got to ride with him at least for a couple of years and say Colin Sexton. I like to think he's going to continue to grow and expand his role and production throughout the years. And last one, I got to go with my heart, pun intended, and say Kevin Love. If they trade him, they trade him. But, he was like the last cog of the wheel for the 2016 finals NBA champions, where they already had Kyrie and LeBron, and he was the third man. But so I'd really like to keep him on the team, and hopefully, within 2 to 3 years, we're back up into that stratosphere where we're at playing playoff games, God forbid, NBA Finals games. And he's still a young athlete. He's still got a lot more years on him than LeBron would have. So if the team around him gets any better, maybe he's that veteran presence that can help the Cavs, pull forward and win that NBA Finals once again.
Drew, would you be interested in a trade for Anthony Davis, even though he would be here for a short period of time? Would that say that you would let go of someone like Colin Sexton or Kevin Love?
Would I first of all, there's absolutely no one on this Cavs team that is untouchable. You could take the whole damn roster and up and down. If you can upgrade that, and you can upgrade almost every one of them, then do it. There's nobody on this Cavs team. There's no young Kyrie Irving. There's no young LeBron James on this team So all of them need to be on the table in order to get better. Would I trade Kevin Love for the unibrow? Sure. I mean, I don't know what that does for me this year. And he's already said that he's not going to sign an extension with a team like New Orleans, who has some pieces around it. So I can't imagine he would want to sign an extension here. But if he's open to it, then yeah, I'd be happy to have him. He's an excellent player. But in general, there's nobody on this roster that I can see on this team 5 years from now when we try to, make the turn the corner into becoming, hopefully another elite team. You have to have superstars and you have to have role players around there. And I think Colin Sexton is somebody that you can deal to get some combination of assets around a Zion Williamson. I don't know that those two games really play all that well together. I think I'd rather have a shooter as a guard, people that can space the floor for Zion to work down low. If we don't get Zion Williamson, then it might be a different story. But the short answer, there's nobody on this team that I think is untouchable. And speaking of Zion Williamson, Ryan, the game you were at was devastating. That was a brutal victory. The Cavs only have a certain amount of time that they can sell that Kevin Love is actually injured. At some point, he's probably going to play again. And when he does, they're probably going to be able to beat some of these bad teams that they can lose to now. And to beat that team, the team that you are competing against for Zion Williamson in their building, was devastating to that number 1 overall draft pick. I will take this to the grave that there's no reason. I will die on this hill. There was no reason to win that game. And I think they just won again tonight. So I think this tank is in serious jeopardy if they don't start reverting to their old form.
Oh, come on. You can't be swept by the Bulls.
Yes, you can. The difference is between Zion Williamson and one of those other guys that isn't Zion Williamson. Yes, you can.
Yeah, that was everyone. I was leaving the building. That was even on Chicago fans' mind. They were like, well, at least we have a better chance at Zion. It is.
That's the truth.
Every fan in the NBA, New York would love to have Zion, Cleveland, Chicago, any of these.
He's
Phoenix.
The guy who on record is saying whoever wants him is where he wants to be. He doesn't have a huge ego from what I can tell. And that's the type of guy you want to build around.
Hopefully he doesn't disappear to Phoenix. It seems like we don't hear from too many players once they go out there. Okay, so we will see in the coming weeks who the Cavs deal. It's probable that Kobe Altman is going to make some trades. Maybe not the blockbuster that we're looking for. I don't know how much Anthony Davis would be of value to the Cavs, especially when we're trying to build for the future.
Trying to lose.
Exactly. All right, another building for the future or just getting a manageable payroll. Chris Antonetti, a couple days ago, made news talking with MLB Radio. I believe it was on MLB Network Radio. He made some comments about all of the Indians' moves this offseason. And he said to bring back the team from last year would have cost about $215 to $220 million. And that type of payroll, I believe the Red Sox are at 220, and then the Cubs are at 210. So they would have been at the very top of the league as far as payroll is concerned. Indians have about $96 million all wrapped up right now. So they are in a much more manageable place. That was one of the things that was a positive that came out of that talk was it's more manageable. We might not have to trade one of our star pitchers. It also creates a little bit of leverage in any sort of trade that they might not have. They're not desperate to cut out money. But what are your guys' thoughts on Antonetti's dealings? Do you fault him for cutting, or do you wish he would have cut in a different way, or not cut at all and just say, hey, spend it on these fans? Drew, let's start off with you.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with it, honestly. I mean, this is the reality in small market baseball. There's no way that the Indians could have afforded that type of payroll. And, the only thing that I regret is, with the benefit of hindsight, I would have liked to have traded some of these players that just went out and signed else. I would have liked to have traded Andrew Miller last year. I would have liked to have traded somebody like a Josh Donaldson or somebody, I'm trying to think of the other players that signed elsewhere. Yonder Alonso, maybe. Actually, I think he was traded. But regardless, you couldn't do that because the window was still open. It's shocking to me. For 4 years here in Cleveland, we had 2 championship caliber clubs. We only had 1 championship to show for it, but the Indians were absolutely a championship caliber club, and the Cavs were for those 4 years. And we had the worst team in professional sports. And for that worst team in professional sports to ascend, the other 2 teams had to be just thoroughly decimated, which is just shocking to me. But no, I don't have an issue with them. With the realities of small market baseball, the Indians have proven to be one of the best small market clubs, out there. They can't afford $170 million payroll. And that's what they were getting close to in some of the previous years, and they had to make some moves. So I don't fault them for the Edwin trade to get Carlos Santana back, to get a usable first baseman, to get some cash. This Yonder Alonso trade, I think they got an outfielder, although he's only a AA player. Maybe he can develop into something. I don't know, but these guys are pretty good about knowing when to pay players and when not to. I think they would have loved to have had Andrew Miller back, but it's hard to give a relief pitcher $12 million a year. So, no, I don't have an issue. It's just the reality of small market baseball, and it makes it sad when stuff like this happens. But you have to try to reload the cannon, and that's how you do it.
Yeah, a lot of money. Michael Brantley's $16 million. Edwin Encarnacion,
Yeah,
$21 million.
How are you going to pay that?
Ton of money for these guys. Eric, what do you think about Antonetti's strategy?
I feel like the Indians are the poor man's St. Louis Cardinals, which might not be a terrible thing. Is that you let the guys who get the bloated contracts that aren't necessarily worth it walk. Albert Pujols, he had his had a great run, but when he got too expensive and he got too old, they let him walk. Michael Brantley, Lonnie Chisenhall, Edwin Encarnacion. I mean, all those are huge contracts, so I will give him that. Leonis Martins, I guess he's going to be the linchpin of the linchpin of the outfield. I get the whole not signing the guys to huge contracts that aren't necessarily worth it, but they got to get somebody in return. And I'm really hoping that the management of the Indians can find these guys, whether they are the Brian Giles or the just guys coming out of the woodwork who you would not expect to be halfway decent to just play well for the Indians this year. I don't know who that's going to be.
I got a Sean Casey autograph at Arrows game. There's a player who's come up.
Yeah, he had some years with the Reds.
One thing that we can also root for is for some of the top talents, Bryce Harper and Manny Machado. They've been rumored to go to the White Sox, or especially Machado. But there's also been rumors to National League teams. I think for the Indians, we've talked about the weakness in the AL Central. That'd be great if we see Machado, Bryce Harper, any of these guys. It's been a pretty slow winter within baseball, and spring training's right around the corner. Machado and Harper still not signed. Hopefully they just stay, or at least with Harper, stay in the National League, and we just keep the AL Central weak.
That'd be wonderful. We're hearing a lot of Bryce Harper to the Phillies. That's people certainly want that around these parts, but who knows where they end up. It would be super if it was not the White Sox, though. I agree. Okay. Or the Tigers or any of those other
It's not quite baseball season. It's still football season. We're in the heart of football season. Super Bowl this weekend. One of the big things about the Super Bowl, most fun part, is how are you going to be watching the game? And that is our final promo of this week. How are you going to be watching this game? And more importantly, when the Browns make it to the Super Bowl, probably next year, how will you be watching the Super Bowl next year with the Browns?
All right. Well, as tradition, as though 3 or 4 years ago, I have loved to start my Super Bowl Sunday with watching the Waste Management Open and the debauchery that occurs on 16, the par 3, the guys that get a little loaded and let anything fly. It's the tournament doesn't matter, but it's just a good way to start the day.
That's an excellent start.
So, I always like starting with that. Last couple of years has been nachos, wings, fries, libations. Usually just kind of chilling in the basement with my family. I kind of would just like to see a good game. Last couple of years have been a very good game. You got the Tom Brady versus wow, why am I? The
Nick Foles.
Eagles, Nick Foles, and you had that fumble late, and the Eagles came back. Then the year before, Patriots down 28-3 to the Falcons, came back and won. I mean, there's been a lot of good games this last couple of years. I don't expect the game to be this good, especially with Nickel Roby Coleman calling out Tom Brady, saying he's old. That's really gonna add fuel to the fire. Thanks a lot. But I'm gonna enjoy myself. And as far as next year goes, or when the Browns make it, if that's not next year, is I'd always like to want to go to the scene of the site of the game Monday to Thursday or Friday, and then come back and watch it at home with my friends, with my family, or go to a bar. I don't care. As long as the Browns win, we all watch it together. But I'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But one thing I will say is that I do miss the Bud versus Bud Light Bowl. That was
wow!
one of my favorites. Obviously, that was well before we were drinking Bud Light. But it was still entertainment and something I'll always remember from the early to mid '90s. So that's what I'm going to be doing, and I'm hoping it'll lead to a nice, fun, productive work week the next day.
Well, they are bringing back one thing as far as Super Bowl, some quasi traditions go. The WWE is bringing back halftime heat. If you guys haven't heard, so there will be a wrestling match that you can watch during halftime. Some of their young up and coming superstars are going to be wrestling. So that'll be one thing if you aren't watching Maroon 5. That's been one of the things that they've been bashing, is say you don't want to be watching Maroon 5. You'd rather be watching halftime heat. All right, Drew.
I will certainly be watching Halftime Heat. I appreciate that. Heads up to the viewers, Halftime Heat. We will certainly be covering that on the I Still Believe in Cleveland podcast next week. As for this year, I plan on, I picked up a new TV. I actually got that for Christmas, a little 65-inch guy. That's helpful. I'm going to have dips on dips on dips on dips, as many dips as I can find, many dips as I can make. We're going to do some pulled pork sliders and maybe some chicken wings. And I'm not sure what else. We'll figure something else out. For a while, we used to do the deep fried Super Bowl. We would spend most of the day just throwing things in the fryer and seeing what came out. I think my all-time favorite was a bacon-wrapped peanut butter and jelly sandwich deep fried. That was quite delicious. It was wonderful. Don't hate on it until you've tried it. And what will we be doing? What will we be doing this time next year? You will see the first live I Still Believe in Cleveland podcast from the Hall of Fame city. We will all be together. We will all be watching this game, and we will conduct the podcast shortly before and shortly after the Super Bowl. You heard it here first. That is a promise. The I Still Believe in Cleveland podcast live from the Hall of Fame city, Super Bowl 54. You will get to listen to us before the game and after the game. Hard-hitting analysis. I cannot wait, and it will happen next year. You heard it here first.
I like it. For me, I'll just throw mine in. I'll probably just do wings and beer. It's going to be a quieter Super Bowl for me, but I love it. Let's go back to the Hall of Fame city. I bet though, if the Browns make it to the Super Bowl, the Q would probably have a watch party there. I would love to. That's where I watched Game 7 for the Cavs, was a watch party at the Q. Eric was there with me. Drew said he could not come.
Right.
But
I'm the worst. There's no doubt about it.
We will hold that against you for the rest of our lives.
As you should. As you should.
But I'm sure they will do something like that for the Browns with this horrible weather that we have up here in the north. But it should be a fun game this weekend. And we'll look forward to the Browns in the Super Bowl next year. Guaranteed. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Eric.
Well, there you go.
Another great episode. And I will talk to you guys next week.
All right.